It was 3 one-hour episodes, and it was screening part of the ABC's Mental Health Week, where they basically took over the whole programming of ABC for a whole week and made every program somehow relevant to mental health. And so they wanted to finance this doco that was in pre for about a year or two heading up to it. And the thing that made this doco unique was that it's the first time a film crew has ever been in a mental health ward in Australia. There was one other series that happened in the UK called Bedlam, and this was kind of loosely based on that. So it was quite unique. And I was the DP. And there was another DP who was on for 1 month of the shoot called Justin Brickle. So I just got to recognise that he shot a bit of it as well. So yeah, the thing that made it pretty unique was shooting inside the locked mental health wards at Liverpool Hospital, which had its ups and downs, and it was a pretty interesting experience. I learnt a lot, and hopefully the audience did as well. And so I feel like maybe to give you a bit more context, because that's just like a 60-second piece, I'll show you a scene from the series to kind of give you a bit more of an idea of what the doco was about and what we kind of went through. I'll just give you a bit of background. So this is a scene with, there was a patient that we were filming who's one of the main characters of the documentary called Sandra, and she had really quite serious bipolar. She's had it her whole life, and she's 63 years old and she's got a family. And so the family have basically spent their entire lives dealing with her condition, and of course her as well. So this scene is about the family, so a bit of background.
Mental illness is one of the very few illnesses that doesn't discriminate. Anyone can become mentally ill.
It's an illness that may affect you or someone important in your life.
There's a fine line between sanity and insanity.
It's just like from one extreme to the other. Whether or not she's got an illness or not, she's still my mum.
Go inside one of the busiest mental health units in the country.
You're battling yourself, basically. You're battling your own negativity.
Meet patients in times of need and the dedicated medical teams caring for them.
It's part of our society. We can't ignore it.
A must-see series over 3 nights. Changing Minds, part of Mental As. Starts Tuesday, October 7, ABC.
So that gives you a bit of an idea of the tone of the show. Yeah, because I'm the DP, so I'm obviously not used to being on this side of the eyes. So definitely just throw out any questions you've got, because yeah, I'd like to be more of an open panel kind of discussion than me kind of up here talking about stuff. But yeah, I guess when it comes to shooting the doco, that made it a bit unique was obviously dealing with the wards and dealing with the patients. And so we had a lot of protocols that we had to follow as a crew, which, you know, normally with a documentary you're just running around with the camera and doing whatever you can. But with this, there was, I think, almost years of pre-production between the production company and the hospital to figure out like a thick booklet about this thick I had to read before we went into the shoot of our protocols on how we had to handle ourselves and dealing with the patients, and how they got permissions and access is probably the biggest thing that made this quite unique. And to kind of skim over it, basically the process when it came to shooting patients was that someone would be admitted to the hospital, and the psychiatrist would have to obviously do an assessment, as they always do, but they would also have to do a documentary assessment. So they'd have to basically consider if this person is well enough to be filmed, basically, because they're not going to have any kind of insight, because that's why they're coming to hospital. But if this person is in a condition where it would be appropriate to be part of the documentary, they would then approach us and say, yes, we think this person's okay. We would then have to approach the person ourselves, well, the producers and the directors, and tell them everything that we could about the documentary and what we were here to do. We had signs stuck up throughout all the ward about who we were and what we're here to do. They would then have to be of, you know, safe enough mind to agree and say yes or no. We actually got most people actually said yes, which we were quite surprised about. We were thinking that this whole thing might go completely pear-shaped, because who would want to be filmed in a documentary when they're mentally unwell? But a lot of people agreed to it, and so we'd have to then follow their story throughout. We shot for 3 months in the hospital, and and then basically throughout their whole admission of hospital, they get treated, they get well, they get sent home, and then 4 months after they get sent home, we then had to do a re-consent. So some of them had to actually watch their story cut together. They had a whole thick booklet, which was basically their entire story for the documentary printed out in a transcript. They had all, like, everything that we could to kind of make them aware of exactly what the documentary was going to be about and their role in it. And then when they're basically when they're well, they then had to reconsent and say, yes, I sign that's okay. So it made the edit a very difficult process as well, because you'd have some people that were really amazing characters who originally consented, but then when they'd already done the rough cut, they'd then go and do all the reconsenting, and some people pulled out and said, you'd have to recut the entire show. So it was quite an experience for them. Yeah, in terms of shooting it, the director was quite adamant on shooting prime lenses wide open the whole time to give it that shallow depth of field aesthetic, which was just a look that he was really fixated on, which is fine, but it made it pretty tough to operate. It actually also kind of came in quite handy when we were in the wards, and obviously there were plenty of people that didn't want to be filmed, and using the shallow depth of field instead of having to blur faces, the whole background was blurred anyway, so that worked out quite well, I think, for the edit. And yeah, it was on C300, shooting log, primes. We had a soundie, myself, the director, and the production assistant on the ground, and we had a producer in a room in the hospital who was basically doing all the consenting and teeing things up. Like with one patient who had really severe depression, he had this done before, and he really wanted us to film ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy, and so he really wanted it to be a part of the documentary because he wanted to completely destigmatize it, and because most people aren't even aware that it still happens, and so it's in the doco, and that was really amazing. So the producer had to set all that up, which of course was another big bureaucratic kind of feat with the hospital to get that permission. It was probably the most traditional shoot I've done, to be honest, because it was hospital hours. So we're there at 8 in the morning, finished at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, Monday to Friday. Sometimes we did, because we did house visits, you know, and met the families and got the backstory. Sometimes there'd be a Saturday here and there, but it was generally pretty 9 to 5 standard job, which was great.
Are you the kind of shooter that is ready and just happy to shoot anything? Like, I imagine a lot of what you saw was quite confronting. Was there anything that you came across where you're like, I don't know if we can shoot this, or I don't know if I'm the guy, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not a traditional documentary cameraman myself. Like, I shoot drama, and I like to consider myself more as a DP. So I took this doco on because of the mental health side of it, and I thought it was a really important job to bring awareness to mental health in this country. So that's why I took it on. And yeah, there was plenty of times, to be honest, when it was either confronting in a safety sense, like, because there's some patients that were quite violent, and psychosis is a really difficult thing to shoot because someone can be totally fine and then just there's literally nothing changes and they just snap, and that happened a couple of times, and so that, you know, was difficult to deal with. But that's kind of what you've got to expect going into that kind of situation. The toughest stuff for me really was Sandra, actually, the older lady from that clip. When she first got admitted, she was really, really unwell. So she has bipolar, so she gets really, really manic. And when you're really manic, one of the best ways to describe it is that basically your thoughts are running at 200 k's an hour, and you can only get out 20 k's an hour of words, and basically your thoughts are double, triple ahead of each other. And it's really quite confronting to see, because you can see her mind just racing. It gets really frustrating. She got really quite, not aggressive, but just loud, and just really, obviously inside of her is just exploding. And to see a 63-year-old woman in that state was quite confronting. And that was kind of the moment where I went, well, this is pretty full on. But that's, you know, it's part of the job, you know, and I kind of figured that it's more important to think of the bigger picture in that kind of situation, instead of just putting the camera down and going, oh, this is a bit too much. Think of it as, you know, her story is quite important for people to see, and so I try to think of it in that way, I guess.
Hi, mental health is quite confronting, as you were saying. But what was one of the main things that you learned throughout the entire ordeal? What changed throughout the shooting?
You mean with me personally?
Yes.
Just the fact that, I mean, just seeing it face to face in those kind of environments, to be honest, like, one point they make in the show is that mental health affects 1 in 5 Australians, and like it's the same as any other illness. You know, we can all get sick. You get the cold, like whatever. It's the same with mental illness, really. And to see people come in so unwell and get treated and medicated and everything they needed, and then leave, and just seeing the change was just really amazing to see. That they're just people, you know, just like you and me, anyone else. Like, it's not a crazy person, it's just a person who's got an illness, and the illness can be treated, and then they can go on with their lives. So that's kind of I guess, something that I knew beforehand, but just to see it face to face is something that you really kind of hit at home for me, I guess. Yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, at what point did the production company's relationship with ABC start? Did you put in a bid with the idea and they gave you the funding to complete it, or did you make it first and then put it in?
I'm not really sure. That's probably a bit outside of my realm, but it was shot, it was produced by a company called Northern Pictures, who've done a lot of, they did the Once Upon a Time in Cabramatta and Punch Bowl and all that series. So they've got a pretty tight relationship with the ABC. I think ABC approached them with, hey, this is the kind of thing we want to make, but it's kind of outside of my jurisdiction. I don't know, to be honest. I get the call and I do the job.
Did the way it hit you in a personal sense, the confronting nature of it, affect you technically?
Technically, as in like with my camera operating and things? Not really. No, I'd say not really, because I still was there to do a job, and yeah, I mean, it was difficult trying to, in the wards, trying to follow someone like Sandra, who's having a manic bipolar episode, who's running outside and inside, and then in the dark corridor, and then outside again, and then on C300 wide open. It's really hard. But I wouldn't say it changed the way that I shoot or anything like that, no.
I was just going to ask talk about the process of how you make the patients or whoever it is you're filming feel comfortable, or was there anything you had to do to ensure you got the most natural kind of responses out of them, and maybe how you go about shooting them candidly, and do you have to sort of hide behind walls and poke around the corner and go film them like that? Yeah.
No, that's definitely not what we were there to do, and that was quite something that they really made a strong point about in the pre-production stuff that we had to go through, because it's so heavily dependent on consent, and that was such a big issue. Obviously, fair enough. There was no, I mean, once we had someone's consent, we said, hey, can we film you for a bit? And yeah, no worries. We might just get some long shots of you, so just go about your business. That's totally fine. There's never any kind of sneaking around and trying to get shots of people, because that's just not really on. To be honest, the whole team were quite nice and gentle people. The producer who was on the ground with us had done a lot of RPA episodes, and she was just a really sweet, really nice lady, and so she was the one that would kind of be the first point of contact. So she would be the one going up to them saying, hey, this is the deal, is it okay? And then it's just, I mean, you kind of can't be a brash, get out of the way kind of camera operator in that kind of scenario anyway. So it's just about understanding the condition and being gentle and approachable, I guess. Yeah, how long did it take to get people to get comfortable? It's kind of hard to say, because a lot of the time they were so mentally unwell that I wouldn't say they didn't know what was going on, because they had to be of a level to give consent. But most of them were quite happy to have their story told. Like Sandra particularly wanted us there all the time. She's like, no, come and film me, just for something to do, because she was like, I'm just sitting here all day bored, come and film me, I'll go walk around, whatever you want me to do. Like, it was okay, great. And yeah, some people, I don't know, because they're there in mental hospital with a really serious condition, thinking about a documentary that's being filmed is so low on their priorities. They're just like, sure, yeah, film me, whatever, I don't care. I've got this big thing to deal with, which is totally fair enough, you know. So it actually wasn't too long. There was some people that definitely were straight up no to begin with, and then after seeing us around shooting other people, after a couple of weeks they'd be like, oh, okay, these guys aren't here to, you know, take the piss. So then they kind of opened up to us a bit more and became stories, which was great. Yeah, because to be honest, we found it quite difficult at first for quite a few people. I kind of don't really want to bag other productions, but I feel like a lot of people just assume we're a current affair, and we're just like, oh, you guys are going to make us seem like a bunch of crazy people and, you know, make us out for something that we're not. And once they saw that we're not there to do that, they opened up and understood and were fine. So, yeah.
In the scene we just watched, you seem to have captured some quite candid moments. You mentioned you were on set for about 8 hours a day. How much of that time were you rolling? What was your final ratio for how much you were shooting compared to what ended up in the edit?
It was quite large. I can't remember the exact number. It was something like we shot 100 and something hours of stuff. To be honest, it wasn't that intense because we were so restricted by who we could film and where we could go and stuff. It's not like I was just hitting roll and just walking around. It was quite specific, like, okay, we're going to go see Sandra today, and so Jenny would have to go and make sure she's okay for us to come in. Okay, cool. So then we go in and we shoot her for an hour, and we come back, we figure out who we're going to follow next or where we're going to go. So it wasn't like just rolling on everything that was happening, because we had to be quite selective with what we could roll on. So the ratio wasn't huge, basically, not like a normal documentary.
Do you feel that anybody you filmed during the whole process was actually helped by the process? Did you go back and sort of talk to people later on, and it was a positive thing? Did you see any evidence of that?
There was one guy called Jeffrey who was on the show, who was quite unwell, and then he became quite well, and he apparently afterwards came up to us and was really thankful for having us around. Just like I was saying with Sandra, it's just something to do, someone to talk to. So he quite liked having us around, and he kind of thanked us for doing that. Yeah, which is great.
So it seems like you've been affected, you know, quite heavily by the whole experience. But is there one particular moment that you say, or could say, that sort of affected you personally more than, you know, like one defining moment?
Yeah, I'd say, like I was saying before, Sandra's admission was pretty confronting for me. Just seeing someone in that state and being there with a camera in their face is just it's not really what I like to do, and not the kind of camera operator I want to be. But later on, you kind of think about, like I was saying, the bigger picture of highlighting, you know, the issue of mental health, and yeah, hopefully that can help people. There was some other, confronting. I got almost attacked a couple of times. Well, the whole crew got attacked by a guy once. Nothing actually connected, which was good, but it's still, you know, pretty intense situation to be in, and the alarms are going off and security had to grab the guy and everything. So yeah, it was pretty confronting. Not what you normally do on a film set, but yeah, I'd say that. I'd say Sandra's submission was pretty confronting mentally. The other ones were just like, well, this is a bit intense, we need to get out of here now. And nurses would have to come in and alarms go off. And, but yeah, that's just part of the experience. But to be honest, I was more concerned at the beginning going into that. Like when we first started, it's an area where not many people ever get to go, into the high dependency unit of mental health wards. And so it was a bit kind of scary and confronting, and what's going to happen, we don't know. But after being there for a while, it's not that bad. Like the violent side of mental health isn't anywhere near as big as I feel like the common conception is. We had I had one instance where a guy got violent, and there was another time where 2 patients got violent, but that was it. Over 3 months shooting. And so it wasn't really, once you kind of got used to it, it's like the people were just there dealing with their own problems, and they're just, you know, really unwell people who just need some help.
I was just wondering about the family, because when you, it's the family that really has to deal with it day from day. Did you have anyone that sort of said, okay, well, we'll let you film, and then turn around and say no, like a couple months afterwards?
To be honest, the families were the opposite. The families, especially, say, for example, Sandra's that you just saw, they were really pro the doco, because they've been dealing with this their whole lives and not really being able to share it with anyone or talk about it properly with anyone without people not really understanding and freaking out. And so they really wanted us there, and they really wanted their story to get out so that people kind of can understand what they've been going through. So the families were actually quite positive with us. There wasn't anyone that pulled out on the family side. There were some patients that were, there's one guy in particular that was really, really unwell, and he was like Sandra, he was one of the main characters in the whole doco, and once he had to go through the reconsent, they had to show him his story, and he said, no, I can't handle that, which is totally fair enough. But apart from that, no, the families were very proactive. Yeah, like I consider more myself a drama kind of narrative DOP, but I've actually, since changing minds, and I did one feature doco before that as well, I've done quite a lot of docos this year, which I really enjoy. And I think for me, as a DP, docos are tough because, you know, you're shooting something and you're like, oh, I felt like I could black that out there and put an 18 key out there and put some diff in here, and that'd be beautiful, but we've got to go now, like, and just don't have the resources. So it can be frustrating at times. But for me, my kind of goal is to shoot the blend between documentary and drama. There's a film called The Imposter, which is a documentary that I think is amazing because it's shot beautifully, and it's reenactments, but not done in a tacky reenactment way. When people think reenactments, you think, you know, tacky TV reenactments, but I think that there's a real avenue there for documentaries done in a dramatic way, and that's where I'd love to go, to be honest.